Welcome to the podcast. Just to give you a little recap of our story thus far.
So in November of 2002, 40-year-old Ted Price returned to Phoenix, Arizona to attend school and get a degree in radiology. But a not-so-secret intention in this new endeavor was for Ted to interject himself back into the life of his ex-girlfriend, Kat, and her two kids, Maria and Wesley. His plan was to stay with them for a week or two while he got himself situated.
His friends and family back in Utah and elsewhere had misgivings about the whole thing, and unfortunately those misgivings were proven true when Ted's dead body was discovered in Arizona desert.
Ted's ex, Kat, and her roommate, Michelle, tell police that while Ted's stay at their apartment was a little rocky, he left after about 10 days, and they haven't seen him since. But we all know there's more to this story.
In the first few weeks of January in 2003 now, the police have gone investigating Ted's ex-girlfriend, Catherine, and her apartment. As far as they can tell, there's a lot of drug activity there, and there's people coming and going.
Right. They have been able to identify some of the individuals, but it's difficult. There's a lot of new faces, and these are people who don't like talking to cops.
During those weeks, investigators interview a number of other people who knew Ted, Kat, or both of them. No one mentioned seeing Ted after he apparently left Kat's apartment in late November.
Well, regardless of who is telling the truth and who's lying, the one thing police can seem to confirm is that Ted was last seen alive at this apartment. So now the police kick the investigation up a notch.
On January 22nd, 2003, police get a search warrant for Catherine's apartment.
Right, and detectives discover a multitude of questionable items, including glass drug pipes, small weight scales, baggies with crystallized white powder, Aryan Brotherhood propaganda, and ammunition for a .38 caliber weapon.
Yeah, nothing much.
Nothing much, a few things.
After everything is bagged and tagged, the apartment is treated in specific places with luminol. It's a chemical that, when it comes in contact with blood, will glow in the dark.
Several spots on the carpeting react positively to the luminol, and they're removed from the residence for more testing. The pieces of carpet are removed. Right. So now, we know this seems like it could be the proverbial smoking gun. I mean, they find blood, right? It's a homicide. Case closed, right?
Right. No. We know he wasn't shot there anyway.
Well, we know he was shot in the desert. That's true.
So blood may not have had anything to do with his demise until he got blood.
Until he got to the desert, right?
Desert.
So the blood probably means nothing. I mean, honestly, it probably means nothing. Right? But they do find lots of drug paraphernalia, right? So that was probably expected, I suppose. But what do you think this means for the investigation?
A dead end?
I mean, possibly. But do you think it could be a drug-related homicide? So maybe Ted, bought some drugs from somebody and failed to pay them. So Ted's possessions, DNA, even blood at the apartment are not necessarily a smoking gun. Even if it's Ted's blood, he may have just cut himself shaving or anything really. So Ted, everyone else admits that Ted was there. So Ted was there at the apartment.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's clear he's going to have DNA there.
Right.
Along with another 20 people that are coming and going with drugs.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So maybe this means nothing. But I know if I was Kat, I'd be kind of pissed that they cut pieces of my carpet out to take with them. So just saying, right?
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. I can't imagine that it's a great rug anyway. But okay, moving on.
Flop house, drug house, people sleep. Yeah, it's probably not a great rug.
No.
And besides, it's not her. She's renting the apartment. So maybe it's...
Well, there goes the deposit.
There goes the security deposit, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Oh, well.
Yeah, but there's something else that happens on that day that is very compelling. On the very same day of the search, The lead investigator with the Maricopa County Sheriff's, Detective Seagraves, and her colleague, Detective Anglin, sit down with Kat's 15-year-old daughter, Maria, finally for an interview.
It should be noted that earlier in the episodes, we've heard from multiple people that Ted and Maria did not get along at all. In fact, on occasion, the two had gotten into physical altercations.
Right, right. And at least one person that the police interviewed said that she should be considered as a suspect in his murder.
Right. The gentleman that lived in the same apartment with them.
Russell.
Apartment building, yeah.
Yep.
It should also be noted that we got the contents of their interview from hundreds of police reports that we've read through this case.
And that's not exactly true. It's thousands of police reports that we read through.
That's right.
So we're presenting this information straight from the horse's mouth, as they say.
Maria openly admits that she doesn't want to be there. She's somewhat hostile. Maria tells the detectives that she's been living north in Prescott.
Right. And when pressed about her relationship with Ted, Maria says that they didn't like one another and he would beat the shit out of her.
She tells police that when Ted was in town, she was not living in the apartment with her mother, Catherine, and her brother, Wesley. She was living with her ex-boyfriend's father. Unusual. Her boyfriend, Michael, is currently in jail in Maricopa County.
Maria emphatically states multiple times that she doesn't know anything about Ted's death. Detectives press Maria that if she thinks any of the men in her or her mother's life might have killed Ted to protect her or her mother, given the turbulent relationship she claims to have had with Ted, she should tell them now.
She says that if she wanted it done, she would have asked them, but she wouldn't ask because she'd do it herself. Really? She goes on to admit that she has an assault rifle, but she claims she's never fired it.
What kind of a 14-year-old kid says these things to police officers?
Yeah.
I mean, does she not know she's being interrogated for a murder? I mean, so of all the things we know about her, the one thing we just learned is she's not very bright.
And she's got a gun.
And she's got a gun, but she's never fired it.
But it's not, yeah, okay.
Right. So the detective's line of questioning veers into different subjects, including different people that come and go from her mother's apartment. Maria does say that she heard a rumor that Ted was threatening to narc on someone. And it's possible that person was inclined to do something about it.
Yeah. When detectives ask Maria if she knows more than she's telling them, she says yes.
Not too bright, as I mentioned.
Yeah. But when they ask her point blank if she killed Ted, she answers no.
So look, Maria is a tough cookie, right? Especially for a 14-year-old.
Well, look how she's grown up. I mean, the people surrounding her, people in jail around her.
And she essentially has had no adult supervision, right? And she had Ted, but apparently that, Ted tried to be an adult, but apparently that didn't work out so well.
Well, she's now 14. And so when Ted was with her, which was at least over a year ago, she was younger. She was not an adolescent. So, things, even then she didn't get along with him well, but now she's a relatively wild adolescent without any parenting.
Relatively wild, yeah. I mean, how many 14-year-olds do you know running around with an assault rifle, even though they may never have fired it?
Sleeping with a 20-year-old.
Sleeping with a 20-year-old.
With their parents' consent.
And claiming to the police that if she wanted Ted dead, she would have done it herself.
And she's thought of it in the past.
Point. So we know the Kat's apartment is a pretty seedy place, right? And we know the people there are pretty suspicious. But Maria seems to be the first person that really wanted Ted dead.
Yeah. Yeah, I would put her towards the top of the list.
I mean, obviously someone at the drug house did it, right? But who?
Yeah.
I mean, there's a long list of people coming and going. How do you figure out which one?
Kat, her roommate, Michelle, her daughter, Maria, all seem like good suspects, but police can't really arrest anyone and hope it'll shakes out.
Right. I mean, first of all, they have to have evidence, right? They can't just willy-nilly arrest somebody because they think they know it. If they make a big move, too, it just might send the guilty party off running, right? That person might leave the state, and that would make them pretty difficult to find.
Yeah. Yeah. So police have to play their cards right, and they believe Kat's 12-year-old son, Wesley, might be a good source of information. And they call him in for an interview.
We got the contents of this interview straight from the police reports themselves. So while we don't have the recordings of the interviews, these came straight from the transcripts of those interviews.
So Wesley admits that he and Ted were buddies, and he really liked having him around.
Even though his mother, Kat, wanted to end the relationship and have Ted leave, Wesley wanted him to stay. So he feels like that's why Ted stayed.
The detective asks Wes if he can remember the last time he saw Ted. And Wes tells him that his mom and Ted got into an argument in early December, and during that fight, it got physical, and his mother threw a phone at Ted. And I don't think it was a cell phone because this was in 2002. So it was a big phone. His nose started bleeding, and Wes says he tried to help Ted clean himself up.
Right.
A source of blood, by the way.
And that's a source of blood. Right. But so I'm thinking about in the early 2000s, what you had were those cordless phones with a base station and a handset. And I'm thinking that's probably what you threw. And they were pretty heavy. They're pretty big and bulky and heavy. So.
Right.
Well, anyway, this is something that Kat has already admitted to the police, so it's not a huge reveal.
It was at this point that his mother told him to leave and go to the neighbor's house because she didn't want Wes hanging around Ted.
So Wes says that Michelle and two individuals named Lily and Brandon, two more people here, they were also there, but Maria was not. So she was living with her new parents.
We should know that Wes called them her new parents, but the police knew that she was living with her boyfriend's father.
Right. Well, given his young age, apparently, some people were trying to shield Wes from certain truths, right?
Yeah.
I mean, which is crazy given everything else that seems to be going on in that household. It's like,
Right.
you know, all these drugs and it just, I don't know, it seems nuts.
So during this altercation, Wes says he left, but after a while he says he returned to the house and Ted was still there, sitting on the couch, but still bleeding.
Okay. He says that at that point, his mother told him that Ted was fine. A friend was going to take him to the bus station and he was going back to Utah, which is interesting because earlier Kat said he just left and she assumed
Walked
he was
out
on a
his
bus.
own. Right.
Not that some friend came and got him and took him to the bus station, right?
An inconsistency.
It's very inconsistent.
And at that point, he and his mother left and went to a friend's house.
But later on, when the two of them returned to the house, Ted was gone. So Wes was told that he'd gone to the bus station. You know, Wes says after that, everything returned to normal.
Normal.
I hesitate to use the word normal.
Yeah. His normal.
Right.
But weeks later, they heard from Ted's mother that Ted hadn't returned to Utah.
He says that's when they figured out that Ted must have traded in his bus ticket and spent the money drinking.
And weeks later, they heard the story that Ted had gotten into a fight with a local woman and beat her up. But he says that they didn't believe the story. Wes says that that's not like Ted to beat up a lady.
Right.
Well, that's interesting, though.
Yeah, it is. But it should be noted that during our ruse to get more information out of Catherine, police told her a lie about Ted getting into a fight with a woman.
Right. So he goes on to say that in early January, he and his mother, this is still Wesley we're talking about, had a frank conversation about Ted's death.
Right. He says that one day he told his mother, "I think I know how Ted died." And she said, "I already know. And I think I should tell you. Ted was shot in the chest." Pretty funny for somebody who had no idea and thought Ted got on a bus, but wasn't sure. He just left.
Wow. So when the detective asks Wes if his mother killed Ted, and he says no.
But of course, he does say that he thinks his sister Maria could have done it.
Doesn't think the mother could do it, but wouldn't put it past his sister. Yeah.
Right. Who, by the way, has a gun and would kill him if she wanted to.
Right.
Nah.
As the police interview witness after witness, it seems like there's a likelihood that Maria is somehow involved. But soon police would talk to another witness who would send them in a different direction. In late February, police catch a break. Kat's roommate, Michelle, gets arrested for child abuse and possession of dangerous drugs.
And it's sad that that is a break, but it is. So Michelle has a 2-year-old daughter, Emily.
Remember, she lives with her
Right.
Only occasionally because she's been in the care of her mother.
Her daughter, Emily, right? So she does not have custody of her daughter.
Right. Now we know partially why.
Right.
But she's willing to talk about what she might know about Ted's disappearance. So it sounds like things may be opening up a little bit.
I mean, it's amazing what people will talk about when it's their own butt on the line,
Right.
isn't it?
Yeah.
Not to belabor the point, but we're basing what we're telling you about these interviews based on the police transcript of that interview with Michelle.
So the police show Michelle a picture of some of the clothing found on Ted's body, and she positively identifies the sneakers. She knows that they're his because she tripped over them in the living room while she was trying to vacuum.
Well, because he was living on the couch, of course.
Right.
And then she goes on to tell police all the details she can remember about a night back in early December.
On this particular night, as usual, there are a few people hanging around the house, namely Kat, Brandon, Matt, Lee, and Kat's son, Wesley.
Right. Michelle tells the police that Kat is smoking meth pretty often, right? That she would even do it in front of and sometimes with her daughter Maria. But according to Michelle, Maria isn't there on this particular night.
Michelle says that Kat confronts Ted, saying he has overstayed his welcome and it's time for him to go.
Time for him to go.
Well, so that's consistent with what we've heard before.
So, when you're doing an investigation and different people tell you the same story with the same sort of details, you tend to believe them. So there's some truth to what these people are saying, obviously. Well, here's a recording of lead investigator, Detective Seagraves, talking about her interview of Michelle.
There was an argument. It acknowledges that it was over Ted Price making threats against the family that was living there. That he was going to call the police and snitch him off for selling drugs and using drugs and allowing little Maria to kind of come and go as she pleases and live with these older guys and smoke methamphetamine with her mother. So he was going to snitch them off. And so she acknowledged that she was in the kitchen. She did witness the fight. She said that the victim had fallen down from where he was seated on the couch. That she, although she didn't have her CNA license anymore, she felt that the victim had a broken nose, and she talked about where he bled, and that there was a phone call that Catherine made.
Michelle tells Seagraves that Kat made a call to a man named Gunch, which was a nickname for a man named Aaron Gunches, and he was a regular at the house.
So Michelle tells the detective that she was getting nervous because at the time she was having legal trouble and her 2-year-old daughter was in the custody of her mom. And her mom was coming over for a visit with the young daughter.
Right.
So there's blood on the floor and on Ted's face. This would not be a good look.
Michelle's story at that point doesn't mesh with Wesley's account from that night. She says that at that point, Kat and Wesley left the house.
Right. And she goes on to tell Detective Seagraves that while Catherine was gone, Ted was out of it and just lying on the sofa. And soon, the man named Aaron Gunches, or Gunch, arrived, and he was angry. We'll be right back. If you're enjoying this episode, please leave a 5-star review. They are extremely important to growing our audience and a way to support us without us asking for any money. We also value written reviews to help us know what we're doing well and areas that we can improve. We'll be sharing some of your comments on future episodes of the podcast. Thank you. Here's a recording of lead investigator, Detective Seagraves.
Described that he was in a rage when he came in through the door and was very angry, grabbed the victim who was incoherent because he couldn't talk, he couldn't stand, he couldn't answer, grabbed him by the hair, put a gun up to his head and said, "I should just get rid of you now, you worthless piece of motherfucker, piece of shit. I should just take you out now." So as Gunches leaves, goes in the bedroom, takes the phone call. She can hear him on the phone. And she assumes it's, Catherine, but she doesn't know for a fact. Aaron Gunches comes out, is a little bit more calm at this point, seemed to have a plan. She said that Gunches told her to shut the fuck up, Michelle. Go get his stuff together. Michelle proceeded to go through the apartment and collect what she knew for a fact were belongings of Ted and put them in the living room, trying to wipe his face. Michelle Beck said she tried to change his shirt, but because it was so bloody, she wasn't able to give me the color, but described his, his clothing from the waist down. She denies taking the victim to the car, denies taking any of his belongings, that they were all taken to the car by Mr. Gunches.
So we have to wonder what was Kat's intention of calling this guy.
Right, we do. And then we also have to question so many inconsistencies in these stories. Just for the record, I would never want to be a police detective because this would drive me batty.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you've got 5 different people telling 5 different stories, and there are some consistent points across them, but nobody is telling the same story.
But you know what's interesting is that they continue. Oh, this is like months now into this investigation. They continue to come back. They find new people. They continue to interview them. It's almost just like on TV.
It's almost just like on TV. That's right. Yeah. But they have this growing list of suspects. But, I think they're pretty focused on Kat's apartment.
Yes.
It was someone in Kat's apartment that did this.
And it sounds like they've got, sorry to interrupt you, but it sounds like they actually have an incident that kind of initiated this.
It seems.
Right? I mean, there's this altercation between Kat and him. There's some anger involved. And now I know that this guy drops in and who's called in is angry. So
that's the thing, right? He must have been called in, right? So that the question in my mind is, Kat goes off into the bedroom and she makes a phone call. Nobody knows exactly what was said on this phone call.
Right.
Nobody knows exactly who she called, none of that. But what we do know is that soon after the phone call, she takes Wesley and leaves.
And he shows up.
And very quickly after that, he shows up.
Gunch.
Whoever
this guy is.
And he's angry. So
Well, he's now a new suspect.
Well, he's a new suspect, but in my mind, he comes in angry. There's a reason he's angry before he gets there. So someone must have said something to him.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
So it's very interesting, but we don't know yet what goes on or who Gunches is or what he might do. So join us next week for episode 4 of Aftermath of Murder.
The series.
I'm Gary Mason.
I'm Mike Schuster.
This has been Aftermath of Murder.
The series.
Please join us next week for episode 4.
The Ride of Your Life.
Finishing up her shower and getting dressed, that the argument began to escalate.
Wow, did Kat actually call this man on the phone and say, come and kill him?
Be sure to check out our webpage at aftermathofmurderseries.com for more information, access to special content, merchandise, and more.
Our writer is Darren Coyle. This has been a Closure AOM production in association with KM Voice.